Good morning and welcome to the Point. Well, that primary race in August is coming up very quickly, and there are a lot of big races we still have to take a look at, like one this morning. It is the 90th House race where 5 Republicans are on the ballot to replace Joe Hoffman. Representative Hoffman is retiring. He's term limited. And of those 5 candidates, one, Jim Holtrop, has said he is no longer actively campaigning, citing health reasons. There are still 4 Republicans that want you to vote for them. And this morning, they tell us why. It's an open seat, I get that part, but I always like to start in the same place with candidates. Why are you running for this office and why now?
Well, I think it's a time in my life when I'd be able to serve the community in this way, and I'm running to represent the people of the district, to bring their voice and conservative values to Lansing, to answer their calls, be responsive to them, and in a positive way bring their voice and values to Lansing.
What needs to be done in Lansing that may, from your perspective, not being done, or if it is, what would you like to continue?
Well, Michigan has made a lot of improvements, but we need to continue on the right path. We need to keep taxes low. The state needs to live within the budget that it has available to it. And we need Michigan to be a business-friendly place, a more free, a more prosperous place. And I believe the people of the 90th District believe that. So I want to bring that voice and represent that in Lansing so that we can continue making Michigan a better place for them and all of us.
You bring up living within the state's budget. Recently, there was a very long session talking about how to fix the state's crumbling infrastructure, primarily roads, bridges too, but roads are the big issue. And the answer for some people was to create more revenues, maybe $1 billion more. Now, as you know, that vote didn't pass and there's been no conclusion reached by the legislature. But when you say live within the budget, does that suggest that you would not be in favor of new taxes for roads?
The roads need to be fixed. We need to prioritize the $54 billion that is already in the state budget to take care of the things that are a priority for the state. And roads are a priority. It's something that needs to be fixed. So we need to address that with the monies that are already in the budget. We can't take more money from the people of Michigan through taxation if we want Michigan to really be a more free and more prosperous place. We can't raise taxes on the people.
What is beyond, obviously, you're very concerned about spending and taxation, but what is something that you would like to see Lansing do beyond just that? What is something that state government should be doing that you don't think it is?
State legislature should be responsive to the people of their district, so that's one of the things that I want to do. It would be open, accessible. I'll respond to the people that call me. I'll listen to their voice. And if they can convince me of why I should believe something, as long as it's within the authority of the Constitution and it's something that's really wise, I'm open to changing my mind. But I'll be open and accessible to the people, and I think that's something I want to bring to the table. And I would like our legislatures to do that more, or at least do it better. And I hope that I can do it better.
What do you think is the most pressing issue facing Michigan right now, given that 10 years of real struggles have given way to, at least partially, better economic times here? What is the big pressure on the state right now from your perspective?
We need to continue on that path by keeping regulations and removing unnecessary regulations and licensures, keeping taxes low, and getting the government out of the way. When it takes money from the people through taxation, it impacts their ability to be prosperous, and it reduces the freedom, which reduces the prosperity of Michigan. So we've been going in the right direction there. We need to continue going in that direction. And hopefully I can bring that, and I believe the people of this district believe that, and I will bring that voice to Lansing and continue in that way.
So you've decided to run for office. I'm always curious as to why now, and why this office?
Well, of course it's an open seat, so now's the time to get in there. Makes it a little bit easier, but I really want to get in there and make a difference. It's as a business owner, I'm getting a little tired of seeing some of the rhetoric that keeps going around. We keep making statements, we keep making tax pledges, we're going to increase, we're not going to increase. It's time we really get somebody in there with a little business experience to make a difference, to sit down and say, this is what's going to help us grow as a state.
Well, what would help us grow as a state from a business perspective? Because there have been a number of business taxes that have been cut. The Michigan business tax has been done away with. The personal property tax is largely being dealt with. We'll find out more on primary day if that's completely taken care of. But what else would you, if you were successful, would you want to see done?
Well, and a lot of it is stabilization and a fair tax system. Some of this that we're putting out there right now is kind of across the board. It hits some areas, doesn't. We play economic games with the development, giving tax incentives to some corporations while not doing it to others. Sales tax, people who are in-state here are paying sales tax where outside businesses are not paying sales tax. That really hurts the business. But what I really want to see is a fair, balanced, and understandable tax climate so that everyone can really benefit from it and can improve and grow their business.
What would you do to make that fair tax climate? Because if you talked, and I asked this because if you talk to members now, they would say, hey, well, wait a minute, we've come a long way. We've done away with this onerous personal property tax. But what more would you like to see done?
And they have come a long way. I'm not saying they're not. And the MBT is, that's changed a lot of things. And the personal property tax, if it does go away and if we can make this work out, that will definitely benefit us all in the business sector from being able to expand and grow. But then, not just so much on the tax side of it too, but more from the just the gas tax as we throw this out. We don't know what it's going to be. How do we plan? How do we estimate? How do we really bid jobs 6 months to a year out if we don't know what our costs are going to be? So sometimes it's not even just the taxes, it's the rhetoric that goes along with it that makes it difficult for us to actually succeed.
You make an interesting point. There's been a lot of talk about raising a gas tax or a sales tax or something, and it all is centered around, the vast majority of it is centered around roads, infrastructure. Most people agree that the roads in Michigan, at least right now, as you and I sit and talk, are in pretty bad shape and they'd like to see something done. There is no unanimity when it comes to how to pay for that. So if you want to know about the gas tax, what should the gas tax be? Should it be raised in order to pay for roads?
Well, and I look at the gas tax, I'm not a big fan of raising the gas tax right now because right now we're bringing in about 39.2 cents or 39.7 cents a gallon, but less than half of that is actually going to the roads. So until we're utilizing more of that revenue, it's hard to say we should raise it. We're also the 6th highest state right now in revenues for drivers between registration fees, gas taxes, and that kind of stuff. So I think we're paying our fair share. It's a little bit more how we utilize that money.
I always start at the same place with candidates, and I'm always interested for the motivation. So why run for this office and why now?
Sure. As you know, there are term limits in Michigan, and so the current representative, Joe Hovman, is term limited and leaves a vacancy in the seat in the 90th district. I have worked at the federal and state level in government, and while I never thought I would run for office, thought this was the perfect opportunity. Having seen the fast pace that the state legislature goes in, you really need somebody who has some experience in the public policy realm.
What do you want to do? I mean, if you decide to run, you obviously have to have a motivation for something that you would like to do in Lansing. What would you like to do?
Sure. I think our biggest priority as a state is to continue the momentum that's been created by the governor and the legislature with respect to the economy. That is still something that, while we've made great strides, need more work on. Specifically, I think we can get to that through education programs, workforce initiative programs, and creating an environment that allows businesses to grow and to innovate and to recruit talent. So those are a couple of the things that I'd like to work on.
When you talk about workforce, talk to me about that, because there is a real dichotomy that I am told by people who know that at once we have people who are unemployed or underemployed who need jobs, and at the same time there are 70,000 jobs that are available on one of the state's work websites. So where's the disconnect, and how do we get those folks together?
Sure, I think it's a few things. I think it actually starts in the K-12 system, where we have not made the investment or made a primary focus career and technical education. So I'd like to renew that effort because that makes for an easier transition into the workforce and the needs of those employers. You're right that there is a skills gap, and that's where workforce training programs come into play for underemployed or unemployed individuals. I think in Ottawa County we do an excellent job at collaboration between the school districts, employers, and just community initiatives between government and private business and private sector to address some of those needs, but it's needed everywhere.
When you look at where the state of Michigan is versus where it was, many people say, well, the economy has gotten better, and depending on which side of the aisle they're on, they will point to a different reasoning for that. But without worrying about why it is better, what can you do, in addition to those things that you enumerated, to make it better still? For example, you mentioned Ottawa County, where you're running. Ottawa County is doing well with jobs and
Yes.
doing well with some economic development.
Correct.
But you can throw a football to Muskegon County, where you're seeing a county that's still languishing far behind. So the state is still uneven when it comes to recovery.
That's true, and I agree completely. I think one of the things that we can do from Ottawa County's perspective and as a state legislature will be to share best practices with other counties, with Lansing, with lawmakers who represent other areas of the state of Michigan. We all do different things well, and so if we can collaborate more on a state level, I think it will help all of us in our economy.
I'm always interested to know, so I always start in the same place. Why did you decide to run, and why did you decide to run for this office now?
Well, one of the reasons why I decided to run is that it's an open seat, and in Ottawa County there's a lot of Republicans, and if you would like to start on the right path, it would be, usually it's wise to, go for an open seat and not challenge an incumbent, and I've always had a passion for it since I was in middle school, and I've been volunteering for a while, and hey, why not,
It's a relatively big field. I think there are 4 active candidates that are running in this race. What is it that you would want to achieve if you were successful?
I like to prioritize the budget more. I think what the Republicans have done since Snyder took office has been good, but not good enough. And so I like to prioritize it. Let's see if we can get our debt paid off, and also then use the extra money to improve on infrastructure as well as education.
Well, let's talk about infrastructure. It's an interesting concept of extra money. In government, very, very often there is no extra money because there are always other places where they'd like to spend it. But let's talk about roads and infrastructure right now. The legislature was unable to come up with any type of a package that they could agree on to finance roads. What is your take on the condition of the roads, and what should we do about it?
Well, as a former over-the-road truck driver and a part-time truck driver, I know that the roads are getting bad, and we need to definitely address that. I think one thing would be, when it comes to the gas tax, when we go to the pump, we should make sure that all of it goes to the roads, and right now not all of it is going there. I would also look into the prevailing wage law, because if we need $1 billion, if we can just remove that, then we could make that $1 billion maybe an $800 million project. So we can make the improvement better just by making it cost less. And then also, just like I said earlier, if we can prioritize the budget better and wiser, we would have the extra money without having to raise taxes. And if you're just going to go and do the right thing, there shouldn't be an issue as to why you can't fix it.
You mentioned education. What are the priorities there?
Well, I'd end up replacing Common Core. I don't believe that curriculum is going to be best for the students for the state of Michigan. And I think we should look into how we can get parents more involved. I've been to a few meetings where it's on education, and it seems to be the common theme. Is like, what can we do to get parents more involved? And then also, I personally don't care to be paying over $300 in property tax for school buildings. So that kind of goes back to prevailing wage law. Whereas if we can repeal that, we can be able to build schools cheaper and without compromising the material, obviously. But we can also look into how we can upgrade technology for those schools that we need it. So,
the winner of the Republican primary will face Democrat James Hospice in November. Coming up next, no more candidates, at least not this week. But there is one ballot issue that you may not have heard much about. You may not understand it. It may not seem important to you, but to at least some in the business community and some at the municipal level, they say it is important, and they'll tell you why when we come back to The Point. Welcome back to The Point. We are talking about the primary election, and we've been talking about some big primary races between candidates, but there is one issue that you'll be asked to vote on statewide. Proposal 1. It's something that is important to a lot of folks, though it may be just a little bit confusing. So to try to clear it up a little bit, I'd like to welcome Rick Baker from the Chamber of Commerce in Grand Rapids and Mayor Kirk Dykstra from Holland. Thank you both for being here. This is interesting to me because of all the proposals over all the years that I've seen, I have rarely seen one that doesn't have some type of organized opponent, that there isn't an opposition out there. I was at a press event not long ago that involved labor unions, police, fire, city, business, the most liberal and the most conservative of lawmakers, and they all say this is a good thing. And what it does is changes the tax structure, does away with personal property tax for businesses, backfills that money for municipalities that get that money now, and everybody from all quarters thinks it's a good thing. The problem is, when people go to the polls, if they don't know, they vote no. So, Rick, let's start with you. From a business perspective, from the chamber standpoint, why is this something people should vote in favor of?
Well, as you mentioned, it is across the board support, and it rarely happens that we have such strong support. For business community, it is changing the structure, make us more competitive as a state. So for us to continue to grow jobs in our regions, to attract jobs, other businesses to our regions, but it also provides an incentive for business to invest in their organizations and to grow their companies and create jobs that within the existing business we have here. Because the way it is right now is we're penalizing them for investing in equipment. And so this is an opportunity for us to encourage business growth and to encourage business attraction.
And there is an equity issue here too, because this is a tax that is not imposed on businesses in other states. Consequently, having it here in Michigan puts us at a disadvantage.
Absolutely disadvantage.
All right, Mayor, let's talk about it from your standpoint, because no mayor wants to lose money for fire and police. Those are your two biggest responsibilities, yet you and other mayors, including Mayor Hartwell in Grand Rapids and many others, have said, we're okay with this as long as this passes and the revenue stream from a usage tax is moved into that spot. You're good with that?
Well, absolutely, and I don't disagree with a word that was just said a moment ago, because we on the city side or municipal side also understand that for our businesses to be successful, they need to be in a competitive environment that is not, they're not disadvantaged by being in Michigan. The rub always has been, from a municipal standpoint, is that we need that revenue. For example, in the city of Holland, about a quarter of our tax base is comprised of personal property. Equipment, presses, trucks, those kinds of things. For us to have that tax base simply disappear would create a substantial hole in our budget that simply would decimate in many ways our public safety services and other kinds of things that people expect when they live in a community. So the trick has always been, how do we get rid of this uncompetitive tax without harming our communities? And I'm very much want to applaud the legislature, both Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate, the governor, the lieutenant governor, who really did what we so often we say we want them to do, and that is to work together, figure something out, and fix it. Well, they've done it. And I think you're seeing that reflected in the broad support from everything on the municipal and county government and township government side to the business community to public safety persons. The AARP is in support of this whole program. But now we have to do one more thing to make sure that this happens, and that is get a yes vote in August.
And so people understand at home, the legislature has done virtually all of this. They have already said we're going to do away with the personal property tax. They've already started implementing it in some places. However, it hinges on this vote. And if this vote fails, then we go retroactively back to where we were. And that creates a problem, again, for the interests that you represent. So how do you talk to our viewers, the people who are out there this morning that probably like everything they just heard? Fire and police are protected. Schools, by the way, also protected. Businesses have a level playing field. That could mean, because their interest in business as they watch us is less about business and more about jobs. So that could help create jobs. All that sounds good. The question is, how do you engage people in something that is somewhat complex, it's somewhat an insider issue, and it's a very volatile turnout in an off-year primary election? The numbers could be as few as 1 in 4, likely less than that are going to turn out.
Yeah, and that I think is our biggest challenge, which is why we're doing a full court press on the campaign, even though we don't have an organized opposition. Because I think in order for us to get voters to show up and to vote yes, our biggest opponent is apathy. And so we've got to do a lot of work educating. We are, through the chamber, working with our business community to try to help them educate their employees and encourage them to go vote. We have to have people show up and vote yes at the polls, or we do revert back and we kind of start all over again with our conversation.
And this is something that has already taken some time to get it done. As you said, it was, Mayor, something that doesn't always happen. It was Republicans and Democrats and business and labor and the right and the left, and everybody sat down at a table and said, look, this is something that we need to do. Let me ask you this question from a devil's advocate standpoint. Cities, government in general, rarely find that they have too much money. In fact, my experience as an observer has been that they always find a way to spend whatever revenues they have. How can I as a voter, how can voters in general be sure that if this is implemented and if the revenue stream is replaced as it is proposed in this vote, that 2 years or 4 years down the road, somebody, not necessarily from Holland, but a mayor somewhere might say, well, you know, that's fine, but this usage tax hasn't kept up with what our personal property tax would have. And consequently, we're X amount behind, and we need you, the voter, to backfill on this issue that you voted on a few years ago.
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, at least on the local level, we can demonstrate that, in fact, we are living within our means. I mean, our taxing and spending rates, especially the revenue side, is back at about a decade ago because of the devaluation of both personal and real property. When we talk about cutting, we really mean cutting. We don't mean the Washington type where it's a decrease in the increase. So I think we've got some credibility there that maybe gets detracted a bit by what happens in Washington in particular. But the other piece is that ultimately, the voters get to choose. They get to, if they think that I'm doing a lousy job in this role, every 2 years they get to select somebody else to be there. And on many of these things, because of Headley and other kinds of provisions put into the state constitution, if people want additional revenues generated for whatever the purpose is, a pool, extra police, fire protection, they have the option of voting on it themselves because their elected representatives locally can only go so far.
When you look at this process, we've already pointed out that there's a unique nature because there has been all of this cooperation. You talk about getting your members engaged. Does that include a real campaign style get out the vote? Are you going to do direct mail pieces? Are you going to do the phone banks to try to get people to vote on election day? Because again, with a small number of people voting, something like this, as important as it is to both cities and business and others, could hinge on just a few votes.
Yeah, there's a kind of a traditional approach to any, like we would with any campaign, grassroots education as well as getting information out to folks like yourself, or direct mail pieces to the folks that normally would vote in a primary and targeting our audiences. But some very traditional strategies that are in place to educate the voter and make sure that they're aware of that the initiative is on the ballot first of all, and then what the ballot initiative is really all about.
As an advocacy group, you're set up to do that. As a mayor, maybe not quite as much, although you have your own campaign to run, obviously. You know a little bit about campaigning, but in about 30 seconds, what will you and your counterparts be doing around
We'll
the state?
continue to talk about it and talk about it loudly every chance we get to do so at council meetings, on media broadcasts, of those sorts of things. And frankly, work with a lot of the partners who are trying to get this going. The final piece that I don't think we've necessarily hit on hard is that for the taxpayer, it is no tax increase whatsoever. So it really is a trifecta situation.
Yeah, this is simply a matter of authorizing the legislature to do what they've already signaled their intention to do, but because of some of the very rules that you talked about, the people must vote, and this is Proposition 1. It's the only statewide proposition. We'll have more about it on later shows, and as we start going through the ballot. And as a reminder, you can go and see your sample ballot. Just go to Michigan Secretary of State, start the process, click on elections, and you can go right down the ballot and see what's there, what issues like this one you'll have to vote on, as well as those candidates. And of course, we continue to showcase those candidates here on the program. And we're back with more To the Point in just a moment. So here we are. Summer is upon us, and so is the primary election. Question is, who will turn out at the polls on August 5th? Are you paying attention, doing your homework, and figuring out how you're going to vote? I hope so, and I hope you'll join us every Sunday morning as we bring you more candidate interviews and information about that primary election. See you next Sunday. To the Point.